Is the unnamed tavern named unnamed tavern? Is unnamed tavern named unnamed tavern, or is it a tavern that's not been named?
All right, so speaking of failures, tech news.
Yay!
Yay!
Car makers are failing the privacy test. Owners have little to no control over data collection.
Oh, wait, now there's
Yay!
another group of companies scraping all my data?
Yep,
Uh-oh.
yep,
Let's get a
yep.
car from the 90s.
Most
You get a car from the
most
90s, it'll be hard to scrape your data from that.
it'll be harder, at the very least. Most major car manufacturers admit they may be selling your personal information.
Maybe.
Though they are vague on the buyers, a new study finds, and half say they would share it with the government or law enforcement without a court order. The proliferation of sensors in automobiles, from telematics to full digitized control consoles, has made them prestigious data collection hubs. But drivers are given little to no control over the personal data their vehicle collects, researchers for the nonprofit Mozilla Foundation said on Wednesday. In their latest Privacy Not Included survey, security standards are so vague, a big concern given automakers' track record of susceptibility to hacking. Quote, cars seem to have really flown under the privacy radar, and I'm really hoping that we can help remedy that because they are truly awful, end quote, said Jen
Nice.
Coltrider, the study
Outrider,
research lead. The study's research lead, quote, cars have microphones and people have all kinds of sensitive conversations in them. Cars have cameras that face inward and outward.
So cars are really bad. Modern cars are operating systems on wheels with all kinds of services being provided, even if you don't use them. And I can tell you when we commissioned the University of San Diego when I was involved in Silicon Valley in terms of penetration testing on cars back then, and found that it was fairly easy to corrupt cars because cars have a very naive network. The electrical network in an automobile is designed to minimize weight and cost, not maximize security and privacy. And in fact, we showed that one could, through a number of means, FM digital radio, key fobs, and other means, corrupt a vehicle's control system to do something like switch which is the brake and which is the pedal, right? Even though the car manufacturer is supposed to do that only if you're in the shop. There were some emergency recalls. That study was actually never published because of the seriousness of it. They did a bunch of recalls and fixed stuff, but it showed that the car platform, in terms of security, is in trouble. We also worked at the time with Toyota. And there with Toyota, I was trying to convey to Toyota the privacy problems that they were facing because, for example, collecting telemetry, right? So they might want to say, we need to collect telemetry in case you have an accident and so forth to understand what happened to the vehicle. Having that information be able to be transmitted to an insurance company that might impact your insurance was something. So we were talking to Toyota about how to anonymize the thing, but Charlie, it's very difficult to anonymize what happens, and it's been furthermore saying they're talking about the notion of privacy, and you might say listening to your microphone or cameras. That the other issues come about in terms of the fact that using a cell phone in a car, even if you're a passenger, is potentially compromised because you think of the car as a corruptible network device that other system crackers can gain a hold of and get access to it. Also, we're finding that the car manufacturers see revenue in selling to entities information about your behavior, where you drive to, and how long you stay at places, as an example.
Yeah.
Right?
Like what time of the day you drive to the grocery store, what time of the day you go to get your gas refilled, and when you go to pay your bills, if you go somewhere, when you go to bank, all these if you go out of the state where you are going most of the time. So so it's like, where do you go when there's school holidays and stuff, where your children go, where and all this stuff. So yeah, that's a lot of data to sell.
Well, it's not
to
even
other
just that. It's like, how often do you go to the bar? How long are you there for? What happens when you decided to go to a different bar? Right? Especially if they're going to be willing to hand this kind of information over to the police unprompted. You're as if police aren't already problematic fucking enough about basically entrapping people in that, like, oh, we watched you go, like, drive to the bar, we watched you pull in, and then we sat in our car for the 2 hours you were in there and then immediately pulled you over when you came out, assuming you were drinking. Because it could be like a sports bar. You could have not had anything, but that, like, you can't do that to people. But if they're able to then track that via your car, like, so let's say you've been accused of something more horrific, right? So let's say you've been accused of murder, right? And let's assume you didn't do it. And the cops now have records at the drop of a hat for where you were everywhere in that day and can make it look very, very suspicious for you to have been here, or here of information you didn't even know that they had.
Yeah. And it's also your car manufacturer may be selling your location to advertisers so that if you go to a mall, you'll start seeing pop-up ads on your cell phone for stuff in the mall to try to sell you things, right?
Oh, that's happened with me when I was in Christchurch. That's happened a lot with me.
So it's a very insecure platform, and auto manufacturers some of them are making money off of the information, not to law enforcement, but just to general advertising. And if you look at if you actually read the EULA license, let's say if you buy something like a Tesla, right, you will see that you've basically given them permission to hand over all that stuff, right?
That's a really good point, actually, Savage. That's a really, really good point. Savage said, or certain states prosecuting women for accessing reproductive health rights. And Smitty also makes a really good point about it being an opt-in system. If it were an opt-in system that you got paid for without fucking middlemen selling it without your consent, we'd be having a different conversation about whether or not that's a good deal to take.
Well, one of the things I want to point out about the what Savage Carper said is that there are attempts currently by various state legislatures to outlaw travel to other states for the purposes of abortion. Now, those laws are very likely to be challenged in the Supreme Court, and I actually think even with the current court, probably struck down, because that's a pretty clear infringement of the right to travel in interstate
freedom.
Yeah, which is a pretty core part of the Constitution. Because the thing is, even right-wing justices have been pretty consistent in keeping certain constitutional rights very well protected, in part because, well, they want them protected for themselves. So, for instance, like, First Amendment rights have been very hard to reduce in the Supreme Court, whether it's under left or right-wing justices. And I think the freedom to travel probably will be too. And plus, the GOP is hoping to get federal rules about this anyway. But yeah, like, if those laws are in force at any point and they have not been overturned and there isn't currently like a stay on them, which might be a thing, it is entirely possible that a state could allege that someone traveled to another state illegally for an abortion and then not even apparently have to subpoena, just request that, like, Ford or whatever hand over the telemetry data and say, well, you visited an abortion clinic in the next state over, so what were you doing there?
Or even as far as you traveled to another state that has access to abortion in this general vicinity, and you were parked at, like, one street, like a block away, or like down the road, so you just walked there from where you parked.
Or even if you drove someone to another state, because they didn't have transport to help them get access to abortion care, you might get charged as an accomplice. But what I'm thinking is that one reason I think so that why the legislators right now are not focusing or don't want to focus on this, inhibit movement, because as soon as the word gets out that now the movement is being inhibited to other states, a large chunk of the population from these states will move to other states before the law comes into force, because no one wants their freedom restricted in that way. And what will happen is these states will lose a lot. They're already losing a lot of talented, quality, workers. They're going to lose the basic labor working class also that's in their, in their
Yeah.
states. So I think so they're trying to draw a line where, because they have to cater to the companies also, the capitalists who are, who are based in these states. So that's also important. That's why banning abortion is also another strategy to provide more future workers for these industries that pay like shit wages to their workers. So yeah, so it's a two-way thing that they have to focus on. So they cannot restrict movement, because then people will like, okay, if
Good
you're
point.
restricting my movement, I'm going somewhere where I won't be restricted. People will definitely go for
And
that.
on top of that, you also have to be concerned that if they are also, in fact, collecting data or have easily hackable audio data collection, if you're having a conversation in your car and you're driving somebody to an abortion thing and you're trying to keep it on the down low because it's some bullshit legal shit, you're boned. You're completely boned.
Now, somebody might say, "Hey, I have nothing to hide," right? And thing, and I don't care. The problem, of course, is
Yeah.
that your information, right? First of all, your electronic car platform is extraordinarily insecure, and other people can gain access to it. The second thing is that your car company or others are using the information to market and exploit you, right?
It's about consent.
Furthermore, if there's people that are inside your vehicle, the thing that happens is that your vehicle learns how they are. Because have you ever been, like, if you're in like a rideshare program, or where you have a cell phone and all of a sudden you see a pop up on the driver's thing, you want to connect to blah blah blah. There's that they detect my cell phone as being part of the car, and now I'm tied into that infrastructure, and that's being sold out. So
I was going to say, there's another thing about the I don't have anything to hide. Here's the thing about that, right?
That can be fudged with. If data can be accessed, it can be inserted also. So
well, there's that, but
if someone's...
also,
go on.
So also, you might think that you have nothing to hide right now. But here's the thing. I want you to imagine yourself as someone who occasionally recreationally partook in marijuana before marijuana prohibition. One day, you were a perfectly fine, law-abiding citizen with nothing to hide. The next day, you were a federal criminal who was in possession of highly illegal substances. Now, if you don't think that something that you're currently doing that is perfectly legal and above board could become banned tomorrow, I've got news for you. It absolutely can. There is nothing that's stopping that from happening. Now, is it likely that something that you're currently doing is about to be banned tomorrow? No. But like over the course of your life, there's a fair chance that something that you're doing right now that you would like to continue doing will become a crime.
Yeah.
I would prefer that
park,
if that happens
you
to me.
park
Reproductive
in a
health
vicinity of an adult club, and they make an assumption that you participated in it, and then try to shame you into stuff, or they try to sell you stuff based upon that marketing thing. Again,
or they then
it's not a
take
matter
it
of
as
do you have
like
anything to hide.
from a legalese manner, because there's a lot of ways you can like kind of make that work from a legal argument as a lawyer.
There are multiple reasons to not want the government to have all your information without you currently being someone who is actually guilty of a crime.
It's a matter of like consent, and it's not about a matter about whether or not you have something to hide. It's whether or not you consent and whether or not you trust your government. And you should never trust your government.
As a general rule, no.
And even if you don't mind that you're being monitored, the people that are associated with you may, right? So even though you say, well, I don't care, but other people that are nearby are also being impacted to consider that. So again, cars are extremely insecure platforms. There's a reason why I drive a vehicle from the last millennium that is a carburetor. The most advanced electronics are an alternator and spark plugs, right? There's a good reason why.
I did the same thing last year. I think so. I have shown pictures of my car that I used to have. It was the latest model with everything, digital in there. I could connect my GPS. I could connect a lot of shit, a lot of shit in there. Bluetooth, everything, microphone, phone, take calls and shit. I sold that car
Yeah.
and I bought a second-hand 2018 model of a Holden because I was not happy with the amount of data that was going in through that car, and I was just like, and because when I was in Christchurch, I had that car. I started noticing all these things, like when I would start getting like suggestions when I was on Twitter through ads, or even when I was on Facebook through ads, through WhatsApp, and the advertisement. I was just like, I got freaked out. I was just like, this is
Yes.
not good. And I was like, this is
like
and that's why.
1989 Dodge trucks only.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Literally nothing but steel and carburetor.
So it's a very significant problem against consumers. And when you buy one of those things or rent one of those things, you essentially agree to the EULA, and they can essentially market all that stuff because you're essentially the product being advertised to companies.
One of the things is we keep reading this a little bit, right? It says, we reviewed 25 car brands in our research, and we handed out 25 dings for the companies to collect and use data and personal information. Every car brand we looked at collects more personal data than necessary and uses that information for a reason other than to operate your vehicle and manage their relationship with you. For context, 63% of the mental health apps, another project category that stinks at privacy, we received this year, we reviewed this year, received this ding. So cars are taking an amount equivalent of bad mental health apps.
Yeah.
Car companies have so much more data collecting opportunities as well. They can collect your personal information from how you interact with your car, the connected services you use in your car, the car's app, which provides a gateway information into your phone, and they can gather even more information about you from third-party sources like SiriusXM or Google Maps.
So I want to emphasize what she just said, right? Your address book contains other people. And if you are in a car where you can have your address book to say, hey, car, please call Marge, right? You have given your address book to the car company, who then understand the relationships and market and sold that sort of stuff.
It's building a network now.
Even if you think it's okay for your privacy, your people you work with, people you have in your address book, are also being exploited. And that's what's not fair.
So, this also says the gist is they can collect super intimate information about you, from your medical information to your generic information to your sex life, seriously, to how fast you drive, where you drive, what songs you play in your car, in huge quantities. They then use it to invent more data about you through inferences about things like your intelligence, abilities, and interests.
Because what the car company will say is, well, we don't collect your name or personally identifiable thing, but they don't care, right? They don't care.
They can inference all that from the other.
If you behave like a goblin, that's good enough. That's all they want. Right? They don't need to know your name. They just need to know your behavior and sell it accordingly.
This also specifies that 84% share or sell your data. It's bad enough that the behemoth corporations that own the car you have all that personal data information in their possession to use for their own research, marketing, and ultra-vague business purposes, but then most, at 84% of the car brands we researched, which was 25, they can share your personal data with service providers, data brokers, and other businesses we know little or nothing about. Worse, 76% say they can sell your personal data. This would include foreign interests. Yes. There is nothing preventing this from being outside because, believe it or not, a lot of the major car companies are global.
See, this is why you should elect me, because the car companies right now are selling your data to China, but I'll make them sell your data to Taiwan. It's way better.
There you go. Hashtag Dapper 2024.
It's like funny, like they haven't even started with TikTok yet. Like the TikTok is so suspicious. Like they haven't started with TikTok.
Look at that. But a surprising 56% also say they can share your information with the government or law enforcement in response to a request.
Okay, fuck off.
Not a high board
Fuck
court
off.
order, but it's as easy as a formal request.
Cop walks
So
into the forward
understand what
headquarters.
you did,
Hey guys, could I get all your customer data? And they're like, yeah, sure.
So understand what Chesh just said. For example, what they can do is go to a car company and say, can you tell us all the cars that were in the vicinity from this time to this time, right? And so even though you didn't do anything wrong, you could be near a spot and become a potential suspect that gets investigated.
We
Because you
couldn't
happen to be-
confirm. We couldn't confirm whether
Right.
any of them meet our minimum security standards. So it's so strange to us that dating apps and sex toys publish more detailed security information than cars, even though the car brands we researched each had several long-winded privacy policies. Toyota wins with 12. We couldn't find confirmation that any of the brands meet our minimum security standards. The main concern is that we can't tell whether any of the cars encrypt all of the personal information that sits on the car, and that's the bare minimum. We don't call them our we don't call them our state-of-the-art security standards after all. We reached out, as we always do, by email to ask for clarity, but most of the car companies completely ignored us. The ones who responded were Mercedes-Benz, Hondas, and technically Ford. Still didn't completely answer our basic security questions.
They had PR people that responded back. But again,
I love the
understand
technically.
that even if you don't have anything to hide, you can have broad sweeping things where an advertiser or law enforcement might say, tell us who drove over this bridge during this particular time. Tell us who was at this mall. Maybe, for example, there's a thing about shoplifting in a particular area. They might want to know which cars were in the parking lot vicinity when shoplifting was going to then further investigate that. And maybe they don't charge you with it, but you get put on well, let's watch this person because they seem to be around places that have shoplifting, as an example.
Which
This
could just
chart
mean
is
that
fucking
working
crazy.
at 7-Eleven is a bad idea, because I promise if you work at 7-Eleven, your car is going to be around places that get shoplifted because it's
Yes.
7-Eleven.
Oh god.
So, some
I know
not so
someone
fun
who was
facts about...
murdered for working at 7-Eleven. Jeez.
Yikes. Some not so fun
I
facts
guess I
about these
knew him.
rankings. Tesla is only the second product we have ever reviewed to receive all of our privacy dings. The first was an AI chatbot we reviewed earlier this year. What set them apart was earning the untrustworthy AI ding. The brand's AI-powered autopilot was reportedly involved in 17 deaths, 736 crashes, and is currently the subject of multiple government investigations.
I was kind of thinking maybe we'll get out of here without talking about
No.
Musk.
No,
Apparently
we knew at the
No.
beginning that Landon had a rant. We knew.
Uh-huh.
Nissan earned its second to last spot for collecting some of the creepiest categories of data we have ever seen. It's worth reading the review in full, but you should know it includes your sexual activity. Not to be outdone,
No!
Kia also mentions that they collect information about your sex life on their privacy policy. Oh, and 6 car companies say that they can collect your genetic information or genetic characteristics. Yes, reading car privacy policies is a scary endeavor.
So
All right,
think
no
about a
more
car
roadhead.
company having lawyers to say, yeah, you should probably mention that their sex life is part of the thing that we're collecting information on. And they actually put that in the EULA that you go click because you want the car.
No one reads it.
Well, and you have to agree, otherwise you get no car.
Well, I will say that
You got to buy the balls.
I will say this: there have been cases in which terms of the EULA that were deemed
Yes, unconstitutional.
not necessarily unconstitutional, but like egregious, were overturned on the grounds that no one had actually agreed to them by simply clicking on this button. So, generally speaking, absolutely absurd EULA conditions have a history of being not upheld, but that doesn't mean that they were guaranteed to be not upheld, and also doesn't mean that they're not currently recording and selling the recordings of your roadhead.
Yeah, so
Yep.
you can go and hire a law firm to have a suit against a major car company, spend all the millions of dollars, and maybe you might win
Yeah.
the booby prize. I don't
Maybe.
know.
And
None
Smitty's
of the
pointing out,
car
oh yeah, and the
brands-
car company. Oh, sorry. Smitty says, oh yeah, and the car company can sue you into a human centipede. Yes, that's also in the EULA.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
None of the
why
car brands use-
that movie? Oh God.
None of the car brands use language that meets Mozilla privacy standards about sharing information with the government or law enforcement, but Hyundai goes above and beyond. In their privacy policy, it says they will comply with lawful requests, whether formal or informal, and that's a serious red flag.
That's just
All of
all
the car-
requests, basically.
Yeah.
Because it's basically never illegal to just be like, hey man, can I get some data?
Could you
You can just
imagine like
ask.
somebody just impersonating an officer, or somebody just saying, "Hey, yeah, I'm a police officer," I'm like without showing any identification, and just being like, "Hey, yeah, I'm looking for information about this car number," and then they just hand you a fucking folder like this thick.
I bet they. Well, it would probably be a file, to be fair, like a computer file. But yeah, I bet they would.
Let me give you an example of an informal request, right? That they can come and say, tell us who was parking at this polling booth area during election time.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
They can, and then why would they do that? Because they say, well, we want to prove this person went to more than one polling station, was potentially cheating, right? Now,
Yeah.
never mind, you might, for example, doing something like doing poll monitoring or so forth, but they'll, again,
Handing out
that's
water,
an informal request.
volunteering. Yeah.
Yeah.
All of the car brands on the list, except for Tesla, Renault, and Dacia, signed on to a list of consumer protection principles from the U.S. automotive industry group Alliance for Automotive Innovation, Inc. The list includes great privacy preserving principles such as data minimization, transparency, and choice. But the number of car brands that follow these principles, zero. It's
Zero.
interesting, if only because it means that car companies do clearly know what they should be doing to respect your privacy, even though they absolutely don't do it.
So be
Wow.
aware that the car company PR people might say, well, we're a member of the Alliance for Automotive Innovation, and they have strong principles, right? What that means.
Of course they do.